We are just over 24 hours away from the start of the 2024 high school football season. Hello, everybody. My name is Travis Berardi from the OH.Report here at WQEL, WBCO, Crawford County Now headquarters, the North Central Media Group headquarters for the annual media powwow with members of the media from around the area to talk some high school football because, yes, high school football is here. We have it broken up. Davy Jones has a few of the media members on the radio side right now, and I'm here with 5 media members as well. And let us introduce those media members. Jeff Ruth from WZMO-FM, Rob McCurdy from the Marion Star, and then our pals from WQEL and WBCO, Jeff Roberts and Josh Stallings, who are on the QEL's crew, and Tim Byrie, coach from WBCO. Guys, how we doing? Finally, it is football time.
I don't know it's finally, but man, it's here fast.
Feels like it was just baseball.
Whether you like it or not, here we go, boys.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I'm sure there's a few coaches feeling the same way, too.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, well, Coach, what were the nerves for you like the day before opening night?
Well, and I always say this on the opening game now that I'm doing the radio side of it, if there's any coach that says he has any idea what's going to happen, game one, they're all lying, because it was like, you used to say, yeah, we're ready, we're this, we're expecting this, and then it was like, what's going on? Mm-hmm. That's not what we worked, that's not what we practiced. Or on both sides, both good and bad. It would be all of a sudden, where'd that guy come from?
It's amazing because you had scrimmages, but you turn on the lights on a Friday night with fans in the stands, and the kids kind of lose their minds. So that's what exactly it. You don't know what you're going to get.
No, you don't have a clue.
Well, we get a little bit of an early look because we have 2 Thursday night games, and it's with 2 Northern 10 teams. Colonel Crawford is going to be hosting Hannibal River, and then Winford is going to be going to Galion. So let's start off with the Northern 10. Josh, you're going to be on the call of the Crawford game against River. What are you looking forward to tomorrow night between 2 teams that played to a 1-point game last year with Crawford going all the way to the Ohio River and getting a win?
Yeah, I think Crawford is returning a lot. Obviously, the poll came out. They are the favorite to win the N10 this year, which would end Carey's streak of 3. I think they've had a 3-peat so far. So Carey, though, does come back with a lot, too. But Crawford bring back a lot of speed. They're always big up front, tough kids. They get a lot of kids that work at football year-round. We were just talking about that. But they're dedicated in the weight room. And I can't remember the quarterback. Baker will be the quarterback. Is coming back. And they just got a lot up front. That was tough, tight last year, the 1.20, but we did not go to that. That was not a journey that we made.
That's where I'm from. It's about a 2.5 hours, about a 3-hour drive down there. I don't blame you.
Yeah, so
it wasn't in the travel budget.
So I'm looking forward to that one and seeing a competitive game because really all the top teams in the N10 have a really good non-conference schedule lined up. So it'll be a good test for them right away.
Yeah, and that Northern 10, the preseason poll that the media had come out, it is Crawford 1, Carey 2, Winford 3, and then Seneca East number 4. Just what are your thoughts on that, Jeff? Does that sound like a good number? Do you think Seneca East good enough for the 4 team? You think Winford's good enough to give them a shot?
I think it's going to be interesting with Seneca East. Over the last couple of years, Josh and I talked about this a lot, that quietly, because Seneca East was always behind Crawford, Carey, who just have so many numbers, they're so big, they're so strong, it was sort of easy to kind of overlook Seneca East as, yeah, they're the next tier down. But quite honestly, I think we sort of thought that Blake Foose was probably the best player in the league. And he felt like the type of player that was carrying them even when, when they got to the playoffs, they played Colonel Crawford. I think they lost by 8 points. It was not a super blowout type of game. But if you looked at it position by position, it felt like Crawford was considerably better than them, but not because of this one guy. But that one guy's gone now. So how good is Seneca East really going to be without him? I tend to believe that teams, we sometimes kind of overvalue one individual player, and most of the time teams are a little bit more well-rounded than just one guy. So we probably didn't give as much credit to some of the other players. But it is going to be interesting to see how Seneca East sort of kind of responds to him being graduated. And also, Winford's got some changes that they've made. I think, Kyle Skidmore's done a great job of implementing his system over the last couple of years. And we started seeing it 2 years ago. I think last year was another step in the right direction. So it's going to be interesting just to see how things play out. But ultimately, Crawford and Carey being at the top, it's part on legacy and part of it, of the last few years, and part of it is just based on an outrageous amount of numbers. If you just look at the rosters of how big their teams are, it's literally like anybody who's walking the halls in North Robinson has got a football jersey on, boy or girl. It doesn't matter who you are, get a jersey on, we're getting you out on the field. Because even the team photo is massive considering the size of school that you're talking about. And numbers matter when you're down at Division 6 and Division 7. They just do.
Yeah. With my Marion County guys as well, just your guys' thoughts on the Northern 10 and what the race is going to be like.
I defer to Rob because I know nothing about the Northern 10. I'll be blunt. I know nothing about the Northern 10.
It'll be the exact opposite when we get the MOAC.
Exactly. We'll tilt the table this way when we get to the MOAC. But I am kind of like Jeff said. I'm so focused on my corner of the world there. But I was disappointed. I really liked when Winford and Pleasant were playing each other. These guys go back to the 60s. I mean, the old North Central Conference, old rivals, and they renewed it there for 2 years. And I don't know why it wasn't picked up for another home and home, but Pleasant's now playing Hopewell Loudon in week 2, which is obviously, you guys know, in this part of the state, they're very good. And they're going to be really good again this year. So, and Pleasant's going to be really good this year. So that'll be something to see. But as far as Colonel Crawford and Carey, I know, especially Carey, going back to the old North Central Conference days, has been a football powerhouse for generations. So it doesn't surprise me that you guys are still talking about Carey around here. And Crawford has really, here in these last 20 years, has really changed their program around. I mean, when I was working in Bucyrus and covered them, they were always good, but they were always running into, Winford was great, and they just couldn't. And now it's kind of flipped a little bit here, whereas Crawford's kind of had the upper hand here in the last few years. So it's been interesting to watch from afar.
Yeah. Is it going to come down to that game at Colonel Crawford, Carey Crawford for the N10 this year, or is there somebody else that's going to slip one of those two teams up to where it's going to be a different outcome?
I think a lot of teams hope that they're going to slip somebody up. I mean, on paper, in terms of what we see, it certainly feels that way. The one thing I'm noticing, though, about the league as a whole is that there's not a lot of teams that are bringing back an outrageous amount of seniors. There's going to be kind of a lot of junior loaded up teams this year. The one team that I think does have some seniors coming back, at least in skill positions, is Mohawk. And they were sort of kind of lower mid pack, but this might be the year that they're looking at it going, if we're going to make a move, this is our time to do it, because we bring back Bogner at quarterback. We've got some players here, and maybe this is going to be our time to be able to trip somebody up. I don't know if that's going to be a possibility, but I think their coaching staff has to think about it and say, if we're going to do it, this has got to be our time.
Yeah, I look for Ben to be atop the league in both the passing, and he'll be in the top couple of the rushing category as well, because he's that good. I mean, he's a dual threat guy. He's going to have Kane Heyman. They get a Bish, can't remember his first name, Caleb Bish, I think, is coming out this year. Their line, they don't quite have the size and some of the numbers that Carey and Crawford do have, but I think their skill guys and their experience, defensively, they're pretty tough up front, but can they make that jump? I don't know, because I think Winford's going to be they're going to be improved in some areas. That offensive line is going to be pretty big. Anthony Evans in the backfield, probably one of the fastest kids in the conference. So see if they can throw it on the outside. But can they, like you talk about the tiers of the teams in the N10, can they get to that top 2? Will it be for the N10? If they do some shuffling in the middle, they're going to have to prove it on Friday nights if they can compete with Carey and Crawford. So,
Tim, is there a dark horse?
Well, I agree what they just said. It's Mohawk.
Yeah.
It's interesting because Like, you're looking at the teams and you're looking at traditionally, you know, football has become so, especially on the higher levels, quarterback-centric. It's like, you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance. You know, in high school, though, it's interesting, you know, Crawford has had okay quarterbacks. But what do they really want to do? You know, they're not going to throw it 40 times a game. They're going to run the football. What's Kerry going to do? You know, 2 years ago when that year they won the state, I just remember when they were playing Galion and we were doing the game, and I was like, Coach, stop trying to throw the ball. Just run it. And, you know, and against Galion, they were behind and then just ran the ball and just, you know, it's, you know, Winford, what are they going back to? You know, they're going to run the wing tee. You know, they're running the wing tee. It's so, yeah. So all these teams, you know, the teams that, you know, Pleasant wasn't going to, when they were having the glory days, they weren't throwing the ball over the field. They were going to run the football. Everyone knew they were going to run it, and they didn't care if you knew we were going to run the football. And in high school football, that's what's great. If you can get your program developed and say, this is what we're going to do, you don't have to. It's just like talking about Seneca East. You know, Foose was such a great athlete, such a great player. You know, now he's gone, and it's like, what are they going to be like? You know, Mohawk as the dark horse, you know. They got the quarterback back. They got Heyman, who's a great athlete and can, you know, go the distance at any time. So you got some guys, you know. But I mean, River Valley's had that. You know, they had their group of guys, and they had their quarterback and their receivers, and so they're really good for, you know. But now it's like, what are they going to be like this year? You know, because we lost all those guys. So you know, it's like it gets scary when you're that dependent on one position.
Well, and it was funny because even a year ago, if you can remember, we did a preseason media show, and when we talked about the N10, and I had no vote in this. I didn't vote, but the big talk was this could be Upper Sandusky's year, and the reason everybody thought it was going to be Upper Sandusky's year is because of Holman. Yeah. You know, and it was like he was such a stud, he was such a good athlete that everybody was like, he could just single-handedly throw him on the back. You know, the previous year, they had been very competitive against some of the top teams in the league. So it was like, this is going to be their year. He's a senior. And then they went out, and by week 2, everybody was like, okay, no. This is not the team.
The defense wasn't what they expected. Northmore put up big numbers against them.
Exactly.
Week 1, week 2, they couldn't. I mean, if you had Holman on your fantasy team, and I had made this joke during our stat review, if you had him on your fantasy team, you probably won because the rushing touchdown, he did everything. He put up big numbers. It was just they couldn't get enough stops to really keep them competitive.
Well, and that's sort of the type of, so last year, like even because I brought up Mohawk, but in one of the games that we saw them in last year was against Winford. And one of the problems is Winford pushed them all over the field. I mean, they just couldn't get a stop against them. And that kind of goes back to Tim's point, is that if you're a team that can just run the football and you do it really, really well, and the other teams are maybe slightly undersized or maybe a little less talented, or maybe you're really talented in 3 defensive line positions, but you got one real weak area, and that's a strength on the other side of the team. You know, when you're talking about, I always talk about small schools versus big schools. I talk about this a lot, not on the air to people. So I'm like, if you look at Division I and Division II across Ohio, and you just actually pay attention to that, there's not blowouts like you see in Division VI. Like, you don't see 60-point games because teams have athletes for the most part, and the kids that are going to be coming in are at least they should be out playing football, you know. Whereas in these areas, there's 130-pound defensive linemen. You know, and that makes it really challenging when you're going to go out and play Carey, Crawford, or any of these, Winford this year, who's going to be really big up front. If you got 135-pound defensive linemen, you're in trouble going into the game.
And that's why Ridgedale left the N10, because they were literally running 130-pound, linemen out there against Winford at Winford's heyday, and it was like, holy smokes, we did that. Tap out because this is a different thing here than so.
Plus the fact, Ridgedale a few years ago they were talking about a 7-on-7. They didn't even know if they could compete 11-on-11 and changing leagues, and now their numbers are way up. Last year they had a winning record, first time in 20 years or so. So Yep. So sometimes a change of scenery is the grass sometimes is greener on the other side.
Any final words before we head over to the MOAC on these teams? Probably Crawford, Cary, maybe a dark horse like Winford or Mohawk, but it should be, as always, it's going to be a good year in the Northern 10.
It'll be competitive for sure.
All right, let's switch over to our Marion County guys, give you some time on the microphone. But let's talk about the MOAC. Let's start off, in Richland County with us, you have Bogdan Miller, Ontario, the Ohio State athletic commit, and then you have Shelby with a very great quarterback as well, the top two. But I want to talk to you guys about two teams, Pleasant and River Valley. Start with Pleasant because it seems like this could be a very good year for the Spartans.
This group that are juniors, 1 and 6, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. I've been hearing about this group for a while now, and it's time. This is their time, and last year was a big step for them. They went through a lull that program's never had. This is a program that has won 5 state championships, and in North Central Ohio, no one has that kind of banners hanging on the walls there in their gym. They measure success by trips to the Final Four state championship games. I'm not saying they're at that level what they were in the 90s and 2000s, 2010s, but they took a big step last year. They went from winning 4 or 5 games in a 3-year span to winning 6 games last year and being competitive in the games they didn't win. They lost some seniors, and they lost some good seniors, some productive seniors, but there's some kids who are ready to backfill, which that wasn't the case from 2020 till last year. They just were lacking numbers, which was unlike Pleasant, but it's starting to get back. C.J. Wessler, he's a Marion Harding guy, dabbled a little bit with some college coaching. He's come back to his home, and he's set up his roots there in Pleasant, and I think with the second year in his system, he likes to throw it a little bit and have a dual threat quarterback, and they got an all-Ohio. talk about the MOAC. 4 all-Ohio quarterbacks are coming back this year. That's pretty heady stuff. 2 other teams have returning quarterbacks who are pretty good too. A kid from Highland, kid at Galion. So this is a league that's going to be something you're going to have to watch from week to week. But as far as Pleasant goes, I think this is the year. I picked them to win it. Maybe I'm being a little bit of a homer, but as far as what they have coming back and the skilled kids they have back and the defense that they have, they're going to be in the mix.
Yeah.
So you picked Pleasant to win it, huh? I had not.
On Friday night, or actually tomorrow. It'll be online, marionstar.com. So.
A shameless plug. You're right. River Valley, last year, they could score with the best of them, but they also gave up more points than anybody in the MOAC. And I think back, and I don't know if you covered the Week 10 game in the rain,
the 8-0 Clear Fork loss,
and the mud, and you get to Week 9, 10, you get to the playoffs, you just can't pass the ball 50 or 60 times a game. And that was what hurt River Valley at times last year, was they just did not have a running game. And that Clear Fork game, I got a score, and I forget which game I was at, but I got a first quarter score and a second quarter score, and it's like, well, it shouldn't be like that. But so I think they're going to have to, obviously, the second team Ohio quarterback, but they're going to have to, I think, establish some sort of a running game, at least more than they did last year.
What about Harding? What are we going to see from them this year? It seems like it's a question mark. We talked with their coach 2 weeks ago on the coach's show here, and he was optimistic about what he had.
That's our first game. They play Mount Vernon on Friday night, and I talked with Chuck yesterday. First time in 5 years that they had a coach that has lasted more than a year. And so that's, you have to have some sort of continuity, and Harding just hasn't. And a couple of years ago, their coach quits on them 3 days before the season opener. So they've had a lot of adversity from that standpoint. They got a brand new quarterback. And their quarterback, really, it seems like Alex had been there 5 years or 6 years. He really hadn't been, but he's playing JV or freshman football up at Lake Erie College. I understand is doing very well in the workouts and so forth. Harding's got a lot of question marks. They turned the ball over way too many times last year. I think they had 40-some turnovers, something like in a 10-game season. You turn the ball over like 42 times, you're not going to win a whole lot. They were competitive in some of their games. Other games, not so. So they're looking for a more. I don't know if balance is the right word, but they're looking for more continuity.
They're looking for consistency. I mean, I saw them mid-season. They upset River Valley, and they beat River Valley to a pulp that night. I was like, where did this Harding team come from? Man, they are getting that. They're chasing poor Chase Ebert all over the field, and this is an all-Ohio quarterback, and he could do nothing with them in that pass defense that night. And then I see him, a couple weeks later with Highland and Pleasant. They didn't even show up. I mean, it was like 11 folding chairs out there, and they gave about as much effort as 11 folding chairs would. And this is a rivalry game. They still had a chance to sneak into the playoffs, and this is the effort they gave. So, I mean, Chuck, I know, was kind of at his wits' end by the end of the season with this team because they were so young. Just so young. They were a JV team that was forced to play under the lights last year. They had a lot, and this is the thing that I like about Harding this year. Of all the 8 teams, they bring back the most starters. They bring back the most lettermen. So we'll see if this translates. I mean, the first year jitter should be done. It's time to play ball, boys. And I got them picked the middle of the pack, and I think that, if things go their way, they use their athleticism. If they can get some kind of line play. That was the other thing. They did not move guys off the ball last year on either side, except for the River Valley game. But if they can shore up some of this stuff.
That River Valley game, they at least have a blueprint of what to do successfully.
Exactly. That is something they can put on the film, and if they want to reinforce good things, that was the one to show.
Kind of a side note on that Harding-Pleasant game last year. Pleasant, and they were home, and they go up 30 points with like 2 minutes to go in the game. So Harding then 4 plays, all incomplete passes. Of course, the continuous clock. So if Harding had run the ball one time, or just kind of ran back in the backfield, taking a knee or whatever, it would have run a few more seconds off. So change of possession. There's I think 8 seconds to go, 9 seconds to go, something like that in the game. So change of possession, the clock stops. So Harding goes out, or Pleasant goes out. The ball's 30-yard line, something like that. Figuring they're going to take a knee. Well, they threw the ball at last play of the game for a touchdown.
Bulletin board material
and
right there.
That is absolutely bulletin board material. And I think part of it was CJ, who's the coach at Pleasant, went to Harding. He had applied for the Pleasant job, the Harding job, and didn't get. So there's a big backstory, and I forget what week that they're playing. It's 8, 9, something like that. But I'm sure Harding has circled that one. But you love to see those rivalry games.
Yeah. I was just going to say, as these guys are talking about Harding, I don't see Harding a ton during the season or anything, but I'm connected with some people down there, and I've joked for a decade now that people who are the old school went to Marion Harding, and watching them and how frantic it's been over the last however many years just got to make them want to drink a lot. But they really do have. They're a larger school who has the same type of problems that a lot of the teams that are not successful in the leagues that we see have the same problems. The consistency. I mean, even if you look at, if you think about Shelby, we can talk about the schools themselves or whatever, but if you walk into the community of Shelby, there is still the feeling of Shelby still exists when I moved here 25 years ago or whatever it is. And that's not necessarily the case in a lot of these communities. It's not just a school problem or a kid problem. When you go through 5 coaches in 5 years or whatever, you got other issues, and they're larger than just, a talent problem or an effort problem or whatever. You got a community problem that flows its way into a school district, unfortunately, and we're seeing it as it's a representation on the football field. Harding occasionally has enough athletes there to kind of make up for it occasionally on certain games, but for the most part, it still doesn't happen consistently, and it'll be interesting to say if this group of kids, you get a coach who comes back, maybe that changes over a little bit this year, as you guys were saying. But until you can sort of kind of change a mentality that goes deeper, it's really hard to turn just a football program around in isolation of everything else. Now, we live in a community that I think that if you can turn your football program around, the school sometimes comes along with it, right. Because it matters so much around here. But it is a problem that a lot of these schools that are really struggling, this is the issues that they're facing. It's not everybody, but it's a lot of them. It's a real problem that they're seeing.
The preseason poll for the media for the MOAC, Shelby 1, Ontario 2, separated by 3 votes. Pleasant number 3, but a team I want to ask you guys about, Galion number 4. They got guys coming back. They had a successful year last year. They were right in the race until they played Shelby and Ontario late in the year. Just your thoughts on the Tigers, because we're going to be seeing them tomorrow night.
I think that when I saw it, I was like, this Galion team, ever since Matt Dick took over, since his first year, I always said, they're good. They're good. And it's always just, they've just been seeming to miss that one little thing that can get them over a Shelby or an Ontario right now because of the talent. Like, they're going to be a good football team. They've got a lot of really nice players coming back. I like who they are. But where, they're kind of sitting, it's kind of everybody sees them sort of mid-pack in the MOAC, and I'm like, yeah, that checks out. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that it's necessarily a reflection of them. I think it's sometimes a reflection of the conference that they're playing in.
Well, it's Galion, though, but they might be bringing some kids back. But the kids who you heard their name on the loudspeaker on Friday night, they ain't there no more. And I don't know if they got
the same, other than the quarterbacks, I don't know if they've got Shelby in Ontario.
Right, but Shelby has shown in a history of we're going to reload. One class goes and the next class backfills. Ontario hasn't proven that yet. That's why I don't think they're there. I mean, they got the greatest athlete in the MOAC, but you need 10 other dudes with him, and I'm not sure they've got the 10 other dudes who are at that level. Yeah. Shelby has proven that they. Year after year after year that they reload, and we'll see about Ontario. We'll see about Galion.
Yeah, a week ago, I think it was a week ago Friday, I went and watched Ontario practice, and then went and watched Lex and Galion scrimmage. So I saw both Ontario and Lex, and Ontario, obviously they got Broadpen back, and athletically, he's as good as anyone in the league. Their numbers are down a little bit. They don't have a large senior class. They do have a huge offensive line.
Do they?
Really good size offensive line. Got some good athletes. Gallion's got Prosser, and they got another kid, and I can't remember his name, but he kicked butt in track last year, who was incredibly fast and looked really good against. So Galion seemed to be very much a big play team, but they're really little up front, really little, and Lex kind of pushed them around.
We're going to get to see probably the most MOAC that we've seen in a few years, because we're going to do, I think, 3 Galion games, one being the Shelby game, so looking forward to that. And Carey is going to play Galion, so there's going to be, I think, week 2. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what Galion stacks up against Carey. That'll be a big test. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see if the top teams have enough playmakers to do it, or do you see somebody like a Pleasant that they're finally on that doorstep? Can they finally make it to the top, or Galion can surprise people, or even somebody else? I don't know. Highland, they lost who we called the Dane train. They lost Dane Nom and one of the best rushers.
They lost the hammer.
Yeah, but they still have other playmakers, and it seemed like they started to get things going at the end of the year. Just teams like that, Clear Fork, they had playmakers. They just couldn't do anything last year until that Week 10 upset. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Again, it's at like the Northern 10, you have those top 3-4 teams that you think are really going to do something, and then after that, you have question marks.
And part of it is we're all acknowledging, even in terms of our vote, we're looking at these teams, and that's the reason I appreciate, Rob kind of going out there and being like, I picked Pleasant.
Yeah.
Because the rest of us all did, really? Because they just haven't been there the last few years, and a lot of times we sort of just kind of fall back on what's the tradition's been.
What we picked was what it finished last year,
Yes.
and I went back through the last 7-8 years of the MOAC, and every year it's been a jump.
Absolutely.
There's never been a year where it's been pretty much the same. No, every year is a whole different deal there, and I just find it hard to believe that we're going to have the same outcome.
Well, and if you look at it, as you just brought up, like Clear Fork, I think is sort of kind of a team that a lot of teams are thinking at the MOAC is maybe going to be bottom half based on what we saw a year ago. But I mean, anybody who's been around for a long time knows Clear Fork's never really been a joke.
No.
Nobody you really want to mess around with. And if you kind of go into one of those games against them, they'll slap you around. There's no easy games in that league.
In the year they had it, they took a step back. The next year they were really good again.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
I think they're better than they were a year ago, but they scrimmaged, their preview was against Fredericktown, and Stars on Stars was 14-14 and a half. So Fredericktown's better. Fredericktown's pretty good.
Yeah, they're
much better than they were a year ago.
Yeah.
But
I am glad to see Dave Carroll get back coaching again. He's coaching this
Yes.
year at Fairbanks, and that was we'll go into the whole backstory there, but that just really kind of divided a lot a So I'm
it was
glad.
a mistake.
Yeah, I'm glad to see Dave back coaching again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Only got a couple more minutes with you guys before I send you up to Davey. But Rob, Tim especially, I want to talk about the KMAC real quick.
Yeah.
You cover a couple of the teams. You cover Mount Gilead, Cardington, but
Mount Gilead,
especially
Cardington, Northmore, those three.
Golden Knights have, I think, the most playmakers coming back. But you were just talking about
Absolutely.
Fredericktown.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be. Northmore is the favorite, but they've been the favorite before and have slipped up. It's been since the mid '80s since they've won a conference championship. But could this be the year that they break through?
82.
Yeah.
Old Mid Ohio Conference. I think so. I
Yeah.
picked them. I mean, blame me.
Hey, you and me both. I think we're the only
again,
two votes
they
that got
have
them
an
first, but-
All-Ohio quarterback who threw for 2,500 yards last year. They have a All-Ohio receiver who caught just about 50 balls last year for just under 1,000 yards and 16 touchdowns. So
And they have
between those
another
two,
wide
and then
receiver
they have
should've.
Bo Landon,
Yeah.
who is just a flat-out track star. Who can make things happen down the field. They got the running backs back. Cohen Becker, who is a All-Ohio wrestler, All-Ohio track star, really good football player too. They're going to incorporate him more into the offense. Last year he mostly played defensive back. So they've got some kids coming back on the offensive line. Their defensive line's all back. They have got some dudes, as you say, and East Knox might have the best player in the league.
They were young last year, and you saw week 10 in that rainstorm. They took Danville, who they went to regional championship to overtime,
Right.
and then they went all the way to the river and beat Martins Ferry, who's one of the most
Right.
winningest schools in the state of Ohio, and they go down there and beat them in week 1. So it seems like they're getting that momentum. That youth is gone for them. That might be one of the dark horses.
I like them second.
Yeah.
And Danville, who was kind of the K-Max Shelby,
Yeah.
they just kind of reload. They're going to have to reload because they lost a lot of
Yes.
seniors. I mean, I work with the Central District Board, and we picked the all-district teams. And that Division 7 was all Danville.
Yes.
And they were all seniors. So,
Yeah.
but those three, I think it's those three, maybe Fredericktown.
Yeah, and
What do you
Tim,
think,
you've
Coach?
seen them-
I
you've
mean,
seen them.
you know.
I think that they got
Yeah.
they have players. They still have
they
playmakers.
got, they do. The quarterback is really good, and, it's like with most of their players, I coach their dads. So his dad was an all-state quarterback at Fredericktown and coaches there now. And he's big, he's fast, he's worked with a quarterback coach in the off season and is much improved. from what I've seen, they got the Toombs kid.
Toombs
that
kid
can
too, yeah.
it's a 6'5" wide receiver / tight end that's getting some
And
Division
a
I
basketball
offers.
player.
Yeah, really good basketball player,
Yeah.
getting some Division I. Got 4 other 5 offensive linemen back. Their problem is, can they match up against Northmore? Because last year, their secondary was awful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and then you say, well, yeah, but most of them are back.
Well.
I don't know if that's good or bad yet. Hopefully they're a lot better than they were last year.
Yeah, there's a lot of
They're back.
teams.
But,
Centerburg as well.
But Centerburg, I think, is got some kids back. But you're right. I also work up in Danville. And so, yeah, they graduate. Yeah, they lost
They
a lot
lost
of guys.
a lot of dudes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it'll be tough for them to
I think
reload quickly.
Centerburg was young last year, and then Mount Gilead. I think Mount Gilead's
Yeah.
going to be
Yeah,
much
Mount Gilead.
better.
I'm gonna
Much
see
better.
them on
They
Friday
ran a
night.
lot of games last year
were.
that just,
Yeah.
their offense kind of bummed around sometimes. And they're all back, and like Coach said, that maybe hopefully they're better too.
Yeah.
Well, I hear the guys coming downstairs from Davie, so I'm going to send you all up there. Thank you, Jeff Ruth, Rob McCurdy,
right.
Jeff Roberts, Josh Stallings, Tim Byrie. Head on upstairs. We have 4 more guys coming after the break. It is the 2024 Media Show brought to you by Romeo's Pizza. We'll be back.
Take a look at all the action from Friday Night Football right here in North Central Ohio with great analysis, highlights, coach interviews, and so much more every single Friday night right here on the OH.Report.
back here on the 2024 High School Football Media Show from the studios of WBCO, WQEL, Crawford County Now. I'm Travis Berardi from the OH.Report. We have 4 new media members in here right now. We'll start off with Crawford County Now's Anthony Conkle, Bucyrus Telegraph Forum's Zach Holden, and then on my other side from Crawford County Now, Dan Clutter, and the WQEL WBCO Sports Director Extraordinaire, Dan Messerschmidt. Thank you guys for joining us today. A little bit different than what Davey's probably doing with you in the first half, but we're going to make it more of a roundtable setting and something we weren't able to get with the last 5 guys I talked about, but the Crestline Bulldogs. Back another year playing an independent schedule, but still playing most of the teams in the conference they were at. But Zach, I'll start with you. You put out an article about them, but what can we look forward to seeing with the Bulldogs this year?
The biggest thing is numbers. They're at 23 to 25, which this is a program that at times over the last couple of years would have 14 healthy kids. So numbers is the biggest thing. And surprisingly, I think they have 10 or 11 lettermen back, which I don't know if anybody else in the county has that. So, but that just, a lot of these kids have to start from freshman year on. Hastings Robinette is, I think, the perfect fit there. He's a guy who, he played at Crestline. He played under Todd Rawson. They had really good teams back then. He knows what it takes to win. And I think as long as he can stay there and build the culture, I think we're going to see the beginning of something pretty good at Crestline.
I'll let any of you guys join in on that.
Hastings is a guy that not only did he play at Crestline, he is a Crestliner. He grew up there. Mm-hmm. He understands the culture. He was there when they were winning. He understands the culture. Plus he's a guy that's going to be there for a while. The problem Crestline's had over the years is they've got, 5 head coaches in the last 6 years or some crazy stuff like that. That's not going to be the case with Hastings. He's going to be there because he wants that program to be successful, and I think that's important.
And Dan, you grew up there. I mean, You know how important that is to people.
Oh, absolutely.
Not just in Crestline, but a lot of small towns.
Mm-hmm.
When you grew up there, go to school there, played there, that just stays with you.
It sure does.
Hopefully he can do what the others couldn't do. But again, it's still going to be a numbers game, and making sure he's got healthy kids and skill players. But it sounds like they're off to
they're off to a good start, and I think the big thing is a lot of those other coaches who came to Crestline, they lived so far away. They weren't going to stay.
There was no real commitment.
Right, there wasn't any commitment there, and with Hastings, you're going to see that. I think that's going to move down into the kids. The kids are going to notice that too.
I think another big thing, too, is they got out of the NWCC. They've kind of pieced together their own independent schedule, and they have a lot more winnable games on the schedule than I think they've had in a long time. So if they can, just not go 0-10 again, you pick up a win or two, that's huge for lower, middle school and the youth. They're seeing that there's wins actually happening.
Well, one thing, too, also is they're playing a lot of Saturday games. Dan can talk about that because he knows more about that than I do, actually. But they're playing schools, they're bigger schools, but they're not schools that are committed to playing football. Collinwood and East Cleveland, Shaw and those kind of schools. They're not going to bring a lot of kids probably because they're more basketball schools than they're football schools. And I think that could help Crestline in the long run.
Yeah, and as far as the Saturday situation, you look at that schedule and you think, wow, I think there's 5 Saturday games there. When I first saw it, I thought, oh, well, these schools are from Cleveland and they're from, so it's a travel issue. But in talking to Hastings when he was here for the coaches show last week, he said that and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but apparently the previous administration did not schedule any officials for their 5 home games for this year soon enough. By the time they discovered this, everybody's booked. So their only way they could get around it was move their games to Saturday, and then they get probably the pick of the litter then, anybody that's available.
And maybe that helps them a little bit, kind of being a premier game, because I remember back in the old days and growing up where Travis and I did, we had a lot of Catholic schools who played on Saturday afternoon.
I did.
And when you're the only team playing, maybe some people from Galion and Bucyrus and the surrounding area will go watch a Crestline game just because, hey, it's a Saturday afternoon game, let's go watch it. Maybe before the Ohio State game or whatever. I'm assuming these are all afternoon games.
No, they're night games.
Oh, they're all night games.
Yeah.
Well, but still, you've got an opportunity to see them when
Yes.
there's no other games in the area.
Well, from our standpoint too, we were able to throw in an extra Crestline game because nobody else is playing
Yeah,
on
you
Saturday
get a little
night.
extra media attention, media coverage.
We're covering the East Club. We're having the East Cleveland Shaw game on WBCO. So,
Which I know, being transparent, a lot of times I think some of the Crestline folks felt like they got a little bit short shrifted because we didn't always get to their games. And when I say we, I mean all the media.
Media, yes.
And, maybe this will give them an opportunity to get some additional exposure.
Well, they start off with Buckeye Central, good transition into the Northern 10, and we didn't really talk about Bucyrus or Buckeye Central earlier, so let's start with them. Finished at the bottom of the pack last year, Dan, but the Bucks, what can we see from them this year? We'll start with them, then move to Bucyrus.
New coach. They did lose some players to graduation, and Dom Dean moved over to Colonel Crawford. That's a big loss for them. And as Zach pointed out when we were talking on Davy's show, they lost a number of offensive linemen. They do have some skilled players back, and obviously with the new coach, Jordan Phillips was on Chad Jensen's staff, so he's very familiar with the players. He's very familiar with the system. I don't think you're going to see a lot of changes from that standpoint. So I think the transition should be fairly seamless. So, I see them being competitive. Mm-hmm. Whether they can compete with that top 5 or 6, that remains to be seen. It's pretty top heavy in the N10, but I think things are going to go pretty well there.
Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I think it's another season of the 3 non-league games are really big for them to get 2 or 3 wins, and then Bucyrus, that's going to be a pretty close game, I think. But they've got a lot of skill back. New quarterback. They've got Gabe Bellamy was fantastic on defense. He transferred to Norwalk, so that's another name that isn't there. But they've got some guys where the line might be an issue, but they've got enough athletes where if Jack Phillips, who was wide receiver last year, can find his brother Alec or Corbin Bloomfield, who's state runner-up in long jump, if he can find those guys in open space, it's not easy catching them.
Buckeye also faces a problem they've faced for many years, that playing in the N10 with their numbers. They just don't have a lot of numbers. And, when you're playing against Colonel Crawford, who's got 200 players on their team this year? And, 250, quite a few. And they've got, 30 maybe, year in, year out. They don't have a lot of guys. There is a talent issue with them. It just is.
Well, it becomes a depth issue. Week 5 or 6, you're watching, covering the game, and you've got half as many kids on the sideline, in casts and, street clothes as they do playing because they get that banged up and they don't have a lot of depth to put in there.
Well, one thing is too, Anthony, they're a bunch of two-way guys.
Yeah.
They got to go 2 ways. Much like Crestline, you got to go 2 ways, and you're going to get kids injured because they play so much. Yeah. Whereas teams like Crawford and Winford and those teams, they can go guys with 1 way.
And Crawford and Winford, and they're all physical teams.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying the Buckeyes kids aren't tough and, hit the weight room too.
No, they are.
But again, you've only got so many bodies to go around.
Let's move up to Bucyrus. We didn't get much talk about them in the first half of the show, but the Redmen, are they taking a step up this year? Are they going to stay where they were? What are we going to see from them?
I think it's going to be a learning curve for them this year. They only have 1 senior, so they're going to be still very young. Their entire offensive line will probably be sophomores. They might have 1 junior that can slot in there a little bit, but they have 20. I think they're going to have 23, 24 on the roster, and people say, "Oh, those are low numbers," but John Butchko was staring in the face 15, 16 kids that were showing up for summer stuff. So there was actually serious talk about them playing 8-man football this year. Mm-hmm. Some kids came back out. One of them was the quarterback, Dylan Koppler. With Koppler, they'll be sufficient at quarterback. It's whether that still young offensive line can hold and keep him upright. He's got some skill players he can throw the ball to. So the potential is there. Whether they can get it all together, because they didn't have a lot of work in the summer, so that was really huge.
Will they be a team that throws the ball a lot, Dan?
Yes, he's still going to play the spread. The other thing is the defense. Can they stop the big power running teams? Crawford, Carey, Winford. They all just want to line up and run the ball at you, and whether they're going to be ready yet this year to stop that remains to be seen. I think they're a year away from competing better. I think they're 2 years away from really improving.
That's my next question for you, Zach. Is this going to be another year where they're just learning how to play together, how to play, and then maybe next year is when they take that next step, and then the year after that's when they can really say they can compete?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it and jinx them by any means, but if they go 0-10, I think it's going to be a learning 0-10. It's not going to be like last year where they just got smacked every week. But even if they go 1-9, 2-8, something like that, that's going to get those kids believing. And they're one of those teams that obviously they started a lot of freshmen last year. Mm-hmm. They've got a nice sophomore class. They've got a handful of really good juniors too. Christian Neal's really fast out wide, and Damaris Munpage is a pretty solid running back. As long as they can keep this core together and get some more bodies in. I know they've got a pretty talented freshman in McKeever's son that they're pretty high on at linebacker. They're like Dan said, they're 1 year away from being back to competing at least 3-4 times a year, and maybe 2 from going above 500, which doesn't sound like a lot for some of the programs, but for Bucyrus it'd be huge.
Yeah, but Zach, what you're saying too, and I agree with you, by the way, but the problem that Bucyrus has faced for many years is keeping their core together. A lot of kids will go to Colonel Crawford. A lot of kids will go to Winford. They just don't keep their players for whatever reason. I mean, they don't like the coach or whatever it is. It could be anything. That's been a problem for them for a long time.
I think it's more of just not winning. That it's the wrong coach. I don't think that's the answer. I think keeping those kids, and Dan, you obviously are the expert here, but keeping those kids together and making them believe that they can win and staying together.
Generally speaking, if they keep them into high school, they aren't doing a lot of open enrolling. I know Lincoln Mollenkoff was an exception. Braden Campbell just went to Winford. But I think that's a pretty low, because if they're open enrolling after their freshman year, they're sitting. And most kids don't want to go and have to sit half the year for that first year. So I think if they can keep them together into high school, they're okay. Where they're losing the kids is 5th, 6th, 7th grade. That's when they make the transition. The Locker kid at Winford this year, going to be a pretty good linebacker, good running back. He played middle school football at Bucyrus. So, and he lives down by the post office. So you can't lose those kind of kids. If you can keep them into high school, then things can go up.
Yeah, I mean, the Locker kid should be an All-Ohioan. It's just that level of talent that, like you said, slips away. That's big. I mean, just having a player like that on this Bucyrus team immediately improves that defense.
All right, let's move from last year's bottom finishers to the top. Crawford, Carey. We get to see Crawford against River, a team that they had to come back and beat by 1 all the way down to the Ohio River last year. They got them coming up here. But is this the year that it's not Carey that gets the 4-peat, but it's possibly a Colonel Crawford or maybe Winford, Seneca East, Mohawk? Is this the year that Carey gets dethroned?
If the media vote's correct, Crawford is the favorite.
Yep.
Now, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of coaches maybe shaking their head. The media doesn't know what they're talking about.
Well, I know with Carey, when they won the state championship, they said they have this 8th grade class that when they get up to junior, senior year, well, that's this window right now. So is that still saying true, or is it going to be Crawford, like us dumb media pundits say, that can finally do it?
I know Carey lost a handful of talent from last year, but they returned guys like Dash Puckett, who was a phenomenal linebacker last year, and Eli Steen, who, if you look at him and you can tell he's a good running back, but I remember week 2 last year that he broke off against Galion and went down the field probably 70 yards for a touchdown, and he was outrunning 3 All-Ohioan sprinters in the secondary, and I was shocked. He was just that quick of a kid. And when you've got an athlete like that, and there's a lot of kids, Carey's one of those programs where everybody buys in. Like, these kids are just used to winning, or at least competing for a title. That's all they know. It's sort of like Winford over prior to the last few years, that until somebody beats them, the N10's theirs.
Yep.
And I think on paper, I think Crawford might be the team this year, but it's so hard to count out Cary. I think one thing that helps Crawford this year maybe is the game is at Crawford instead of being at Cary, because Cary, I'd say, is probably the toughest place to play.
Yeah, we were up there last year and saw that game, and I mean, there's no more physical game than Crawford and Cary. They're just, the Eli Steen kid, I mean, he just runs over people as well as being able to run past them. But again, it's a culture. That little community just churns out football players, in an amazing level. Winford, I think, surprised a few people last year, kind of turned that corner under Coach Skidmore. I think, are they third? A lot of us picked them third.
Yes.
I mean, that's probably a good, smart pick, but, they could upset some people too. I know they lost, a number of kids, but we were talking earlier, Zach, about the Anthony Evans kid. I mean, he's as good as anybody around. And they've got KJ Katalik, who's a huge kid. I said earlier, he seems to grow every month. He's like 6'8", 320. He'll probably be bigger than that by this weekend. But they're just, I mean, they're a physical team. Winford, I thought last year was as physical as anybody in that league.
Yeah, and we mentioned Locker too. I mean, Locker's going to be the leader of that defense on defensive end. He had 91 tackles last year, 5.5 sacks, and he's only a junior. So there's a lot of room still to grow.
And up front, how do you get around Katalik? You got to contend with that size. I mean,
That was me. My fault. My watch just started talking. Anyway, tomorrow we will be seeing Winford at Galion, and we'll be seeing that River Colonel Crawford game. If Crawford gets a convincing win against a River team that they're constantly in a regional semifinal, if you can see them get a convincing win tomorrow, and if you can see Winford pull off a win against a good Galion team, does that tell everybody else in the Northern 10, hey, these are two teams that could really make some noise?
Yeah, I think, of the teams in the N10, these are probably the toughest games opening week one. And you mentioned River, very good team. They're a very big team, too. Their quarterback, I think, is 6'7" or 6'8". And they've got 5 wide receivers that are 5'11" or taller. They've just got a lot of size there. And they're big kids. And like you mentioned, too, Galion's a bigger school than Winford. Winford gave them a scare last year. I mean, I don't think too many people thought it would be that close. And some Winford fans actually think that they probably should have won that game.
Well, a couple special teams plays.
Yeah,
was
that's all it
was
Yeah.
a difference.
So
And I was going to say, I don't even think it has to be a Winford convincing win over Galion. I think if it's another competitive game, even if Winford comes up a little short, hey, you're competing against MOAC, which are teams that you're not generally going to see in the N10. So, I think that would bode well for them.
Who would be a dark horse? The other guys talked. Mohawk could be a team. Seneca East. Are those two teams that could maybe slip up Cary, slip up Colonel Crawford or Winford and get themselves in the race?
Mohawk has a returning quarterback in Bogner. Give them a little bit of an edge because Seneca East lost Blake Foose, who, along with Trevor Vogt, I thought was maybe the best athlete in the N10. All of us are agreeing, but both of those teams, I've seen them a number of times recently, and there's times when they look like they can beat anybody, and there's times when they look like maybe they can't. So, I saw a couple games where mistakes and penalties really hurt Mohawk. Maybe they turn the corner on that and use that experienced quarterback to kind of get to that next level.
yeah, and there's 3 returning All-Ohioans in the N10 this year. Seneca East has 1, Mohawk has 1, Crawford has the other. So just having a player like that come back, Mohawk, it's Caleb Bish on the defensive side, and Seneca East, I think it's Taylor Young, who's probably the best wideout in the N10. Like you said, you don't have Blake Foose, but if you have a serviceable quarterback and the best wide receiver, that's going to do a lot.
But the Parks kid played a lot of quarterback last year, even with Foose there. So he's an experienced quarterback, even though he wasn't getting all or even the majority of the snaps. But he was in game situations when the game's still on the line.
He's a wrestler, a tough kid. I mean, he'll give you, 100% every time. Not very big, but he plays his heart out.
Good athlete.
Yeah.
In terms of numbers, and talent, I would think it would be Seneca East because they've got more numbers than schools traditionally have had more. And you look at the talent they've got. They've got talent. It's just, can they put it together? That's a team, another team like Upper Sandusky. They'll be good one year, not the next. That's very convoluted to watch them play.
they got some stability there too. The coach has been there for 10 years. I mean, he's been there for a while. So he's got he's seen these kids come through the program. He knows all the kids know him, and that goes a long way, I think. And again, if you can maintain those numbers, you're going to find players.
I think dark horse too is kind of a tough term to use with how competitive the N10 is this year. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if the winner has 2 losses. Like, that's how good it is. Crawford, Cary, Winford, Mohawk, Seneca East. It's stacked, and it's the best that it's ever been. And I think that's going to benefit all these teams once we get to week 11, 12.
Yeah.
Hopefully 13 and 14.
Well, it's the same as we move on to the MOAC. Guys really high on Pleasant this year. You have Ontario with an Ohio State commit at quarterback. It's going to be an athlete. You got Shelby with another quarterback. It's probably going to get D1 offers and go that way. Marion Harding, they have high hopes this year with a coach that really believes and is changing the whole concept of what they have down there. You have River Valley with an All-Ohio quarterback. So talk about them, but let's start with the teams you guys will be seeing the most, the Galion Tigers. They also have some high hopes this season after starting off really strong last year, but then the back end they ran into Shelby, they ran into Ontario, but still they made a playoff appearance and played some good football.
Yeah, and honestly, they probably should have been playing in week 13. They had a really good chance to beat that West Holmes team. But Galion returns Braxton Prosser at quarterback, 3-year starter now. He's going to have some new faces out wide, and it's impossible to replace a running back like Gabe Ivey. I think he had 1,500 yards and 17 touchdowns. He's just a great kid that was basically their starter for 3 years. Some new faces on the defensive line, notably Zach Sully, very good athlete. I think he's going to be the next defensive end that, kind of makes his mark there. The MOAC is brutal. Like you said, there's so many good teams. It's kind of hard to pick how they're going to finish, but
their non-conference isn't that easy either.
No, you get Winford, and then you get Cary and Upper Sandusky. Like last year, that was the toughest non-conference of almost anybody in the league because of Upper Sandusky having Holman.
Yeah, and Galion, again, we talked about the fact that Coach Dick's been there 10, 11 years now, I think. And he's built a nice culture. He's building some stability there, and that's what you need when you're in a kind of a brutal conference that they're playing, a conference schedule they're playing in.
Who do you think? With Dark Horse again, another team. Is there a River Valley? Can they do it this year?
Maybe Pleasant.
Or
who
Pleasant,
you
yeah,
mentioned.
Pleasant. A lot of people
Because for years they were so dominant, and then they've been down for a few years. Maybe we're going to see a resurgence.
I heard they're essentially everybody back from last year,
I think
right?
so. A lot of kids back, yeah.
Yeah, they've been really young the last couple of years. So these kids have taken their lumps. They know what losing is like, and I think it's time for them to see what winning's like.
Being a dark horse, though, in the MOAC is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
You're talking about some really top-heavy teams. Ontario is loaded. I mean, if they lose the game, I'll be surprised.
I would say it almost takes one of those top teams just kind of stubbing their toe a little bit to open the door for somebody.
Shelby's very good. You got teams that are just very, very good at that top level. Galion's going to be good. But they might finish fourth.
But again, Dan mentioned Marion Harding, big school.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
A lot of kids, talented kids. They get the culture right. There's no reason they shouldn't compete every year.
No, that's right. But the problem is they don't get the kids sometimes.
Right.
And that's been a problem for Harding for a long time.
Right.
And despite an 8-0 loss, River Valley returns an All-Ohio quarterback as well. There's 4 or 5 All-Ohio quarterbacks in the MOAC. That it could be if those top teams can't get going early on and slip up, maybe a couple losses still get you the top of the conference.
Well, the thing is, though, Travis, they could finish third and have a great year.
Oh yeah.
In the MOAC, that's how top heavy the MOAC is.
Mm-hmm. When you were talking about Marion Harding, Coach Williamson was on our show a couple weeks ago, and in talking to him, he said when he first got the offer for the job, he thought, wow, they're the biggest school in the league. He says we should be able to dominate. And then he says, then he got here and he found out, no, that's not the case. But it's only because, as we talked, those athletes are available. You just got to get him out.
Call up Tim Hinton.
Tim Hinton.
Ask
and
him
he
how
said
he did it.
He's in contact with Tim Hinton at least once a week.
Well, that's a good thing because
Yeah.
the last time Harding was really good
Yes.
was when Tim Hinton turned that program
The
around.
athletes
It's
are
been
there.
A couple of decades, but
It's
I
keeping
mean,
them, first of all, in the program,
Right.
keeping them eligible, keeping them
culture.
out of trouble. Just keep,
Right.
developing that culture. And I think he's going to get that whole thing. They'll be in a situation where the rest of the teams are going to want to kick them out of the league because they're too big.
Yeah.
And actually that would be bittersweet because at least you know that the program's
that's an argument
back.
that Rob McCurry and I used
Yes.
to have all the time. I said,
Absolutely.
they're too big for that league. Well, they haven't dominated it, so obviously.
Great
they-
playoff points for everybody else.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
You talk about River Valley. They've got the All-Ohio quarterback, and they probably have arguably the best defensive player, too. Linebacker Tyson Waddle, 166 tackles. I mean, that's not easy to do, and I think they only played 11 games, maybe. So you're averaging 14 tackles a game. That's pretty phenomenal. And obviously, it's not a one-man sport, but when you've got an All-Ohioan on offense and an All-Ohioan on defense, those are the leaders that kind of lead these guys.
Well, it makes other teams try and plan around them, too.
Yeah.
They've got some other kids back, too. So
Oh, yeah.
they should be solid.
Let's go to the KMAC real quick because Northmore is a team that WQEL BCO will be covering, the Golden Knights. Is this the year they finally break through? We were talking with the first guys. It's been since the mid-'80s since they won a conference championship. They had multiple times where they had one loss overall. They went 9-1, but they lost to Highland in Week 10, lost the conference. They lost a couple years ago, lost in weeks 9 and 10, which cost them at least a share. Last year, close game with Danville, lost it though. They finished 8-2 and still don't get it. Is this the year that they can finally break through?
I was going to say, how good is Danville and how good is Centerburg?
Danville's lost a lot, but they're still Danville. They're
Yeah.
still the champs. You got to beat them. To be the man, you got to beat the man, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Centerburg, they were young. They got playmakers. East Knox might be the team, though. They were really young.
Yeah.
Got it going at the end of the year. Almost beat Danville. Took them to overtime in that downpour monsoon. Then they went down. They went 3 hours to the Ohio River and beat Martins Ferry, who
Yeah.
has their top 10, top 15 in wins in the state of Ohio in
Yep.
history, and came back. So I think they got some momentum on their side. But, I mean, you have the playmakers that you do at Northmore right now. All-Ohio quarterback, All-Ohio receiver. Should be 2 All-Ohio receivers, but one got snubbed. And everything else you have coming back. Can this be the year?
Well, we've seen, A.J. Bauer since he was a freshman.
Yes.
I mean, this is the year that this kid should really show the league what he's made of because he's really good.
Yeah, you mentioned the top 4 teams right there in the KMAC, and it's going to be very competitive.
Yeah.
And
The teams at the bottom are coming up, even Fredericktown. They have their quarterback and a big receiver coming back, too.
Yeah. And I, as you mentioned, the road to the KMAC goes through Danville until somebody proves that. We saw them last year against Bucyrus, and they were just huge up front, and just they're a solid football team.
And playing at Danville, I don't know how many times teams play at Danville this year, if North even does, is one of the greatest home field advantages you're ever going to have.
It's a great place.
Because they don't lose at home.
Nope.
They just don't. And it's an amazing advantage for them, actually. And they're kind of like Pleasant in the fact that for a small town, they are so good every year, or Cary too, for that matter. They're so good every year. They always bring up some big quarterback who's left-handed that throws the ball out through his socks. I mean, it's an amazing thing.
All right, before I let you guys go and we finish things up, what one team that we really haven't talked about that you are interested in watching this season? A team might be at the top that we haven't talked about, or somebody that you think could surprise anyone. Anthony, I see you thinking, so I'll let you go first.
I'm always thinking. Boy, we've covered so many of them. Maybe Ridgedale,
Okay.
just because again, a small
They
school,
went 6-4
struggle with
last year, I think.
struggle with numbers. Don't know really what they've got coming back, but maybe they're a team that does something. Again, they play in a league that we don't cover a whole lot, so it's hard to gauge.
Made the playoffs last year for the
playoffs.
first time in
Yeah.
20 years,
Yeah.
19 years,
Yeah.
or whatever it was.
So maybe they've turned the corner a little bit with their program. But
Them
again,
and Elgin.
them and
And they
Elgin.
play each other week 2, and we have that game on
Yeah, we will have
Yeah.
that for you on the OH Report.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
WBCO.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about them briefly, but I don't cover them too often, but I want to see this Ontario team. I want to see Bodpen in his last year. I want to see what he can do. I actually used to go to the gym with him when he was back in like 8th and 9th grade. He was doing CrossFit classes, and he was a twig. And we were like,
He's
just
not
need
a
to
twig
eat.
anymore, I'll tell you that.
We're like, just eat as much food as you can. He's like, I do, I just can't gain. He finally hit that point where Ohio State's
turned
looking at
into
him for a
muscle.
reason. Yeah. So I want to see him at least one time in his last season.
Yeah, I think these guys have mentioned a couple of really, really good teams. It's going to be sort of odd. Bucyrus has really, they've gone back to, I think, the Cardington game. It was actually a good game last year, and they played down at Cardington this year.
They have that Wyatt Denny kid. He's a pretty good player.
Denny is the one that actually won the game. Without him, Bucyrus wins that game. Denny was able to grind out the yardage, keep the clock going. They got the lead because it was a high scoring game. It was like 36-28 or something was the final. But yeah, he was the runner.
Cardington is another team that, even though they're a small school, they're pretty physical. I mean, when you play Cardington, you kind of know you've been in a game.
Mr. Clutter, your team?
My team.
The team that you think you'd be surprised.
I
you're
agree with
interested in?
Zach. I said I would be surprised if Ontario loses the game.
Mm-hmm.
That team is just loaded at all positions. They're just that's a team that I just think is going to be exciting to watch for one thing.
Travis,
and it's unusual for Ontario.
I'm sorry, Dan. Travis, we have not mentioned Lucas.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I know you guys cover the Crawford and everything like
Right.
that over this way, but yeah, the Lucas Cubs, new coach, but it's the same format. They're the same offense, the same defense. They're still playing at one of the best small school venues in the state of Ohio, Lucas Cubs. They're still gonna run that RPO, and for you fans, it's not the RPO; it's run people over. That's what they're still gonna RPO and run people over, and that's my team that I'm really interested in watching because it don't matter. They're going all the way to Pennsylvania, 3.5 hours to play their week 2 game just because they got dropped. Last couple teams got dropped this year. Crawford's now playing Richmond Heights on a Thursday in week 2 because of things like that. But it's just that Lucas Cubs mantra: we will play you no matter what day, what time, how far it is. We're just going to continue to play Lucas football. So that's the team I am looking for. Thank you for mentioning that, Anthony, because that's the team I'm looking for.
Travis, Lucas is a team that teams don't want to play them because they're hard to prepare for.
Yeah.
That offense is just unusual, to say the least. And teams just look at them and go, how do you do this? How do you stop this? And that's why no one wants to play them, because they're just difficult to prepare for.
Mm-hmm.
And they always get so many kids to come out. It's the smallest place, but they
want to play football at Lucas.
Yeah, I mean, they get almost every boy out in those hallways. And like you said, it doesn't matter. They could graduate 15 kids. They're going to have 15 more that step up and know exactly what to do because they start that offense when they're kids.
Yeah.
They used to too, Zach. I don't know if it's anymore the case anymore. They used to get a lot of others from Madison to go to Lucas.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but that was the case. I'm not sure it's still the case, but it was, and 10 years ago that was the case.
All right, before we wrap things up, one more thing for you guys. I want a bold prediction from each one of you before we get out of here. So I don't know if anybody has one on the top of their tongue right now, or Zach, I'll start with you. Bold prediction for this season.
The Northern 10 title will be split between 2 teams.
Okay, so there will be an upset between...
And one of them won't be Carey or Crawford.
Really?
Just
Okay.
you said bold.
Hey,
you
that's
didn't.
bold. I like
you
that.
didn't say
Bravo.
smart.
Well
you
done.
said bold. So, following what Zach said, yeah, I'm going to throw somebody like a Seneca East or a Winford in there and say they may work their way into that top 2.
Okay.
Okay, here's pretty bold. Bucyrus will not go 0-10. I think they will at least win 1 game.
Okay.
Well, kind of the same way. I think Crestline's going to win a game this year. That'd be unusual.
Yeah, I mean, Crestline, they've got, I think it's the 6th longest losing streak in the state right now, all time. So snapping that is going to be huge.
I agree.
Yeah.
I do think they have a chance to win some games this year. A few.
Get some fans out there on Saturday nights. All right, well, that'll do it. I'll give my bold prediction some other time, just because I'm the host and that's what I can do. But anyway, Once again, I want to thank Romeo's Pizza for sponsoring tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming down to the studio and participating. It was a fun time. I appreciate all of you guys. And don't forget, tomorrow, you don't even have to wait until Friday. Tomorrow, we kick off the 2024 high school football season. We will have it for you live and free. Colonel Crawford hosting Hannibal River. BCO or QEL we're working with. I think it's QEL, right?
Yes, QEL.
That'll be WQEL, and then on WBCO, you can listen to Win for Galion. We will have a highlight of that. Madeline Zazzuto will do that. And then Friday night, week 1. So many games. I can't mention them right now, but we'll have them. What's the WQEL and BCO games on Friday?
WBCO is
Upper-
Crestline at Buckeye Central, and then QEL is
Upper
Upper Sandusky at Northmore. Yes.
There we have it. Where are you going to be?
Friday
You're going to
night.
get both games on Thursday.
I
tomorrow,
am, yeah.
but
I'm going to do
Friday.
double duty tomorrow, and then I will be at Buckeye Central on Friday.
Okay, so-
Zach's so good he can cover 2 games
He
at
can.
once.
I'm doing
I'm still trying to
Crawford
figure out-
River tomorrow,
Okay.
and then I'm going to do Crestline Buckeye on Friday.
All right, there you have it. And make sure Friday, right after the WQEL game is over, Upper Sandusky Northmore, to listen to Davy Jones and the Friday Night Phone Board, the season premiere. And then at 11:30, right here on the OH Report, we will have our season premiere of the Friday Night Pigskin. Tune in. You want to be there right at the beginning because we got a brand new intro video and music to go with it. But that'll do it here from the QEL BCO Crawford County Now studios. For all of us here, I am Travis Berardi saying good night. We'll see you tomorrow to kick off the season.